Hey all you chain mailers out there. I have a big announcement to make about a new tool that I got. It's perfect for making chainmail jewelry, which is something that I'm really into lately. I started doing that. I got a little bit away from my armor, but I'm going to get back to it sometime soon after I get bored of this. But hopefully soon I'll have it done to a t-shirt status. Anyway, right now it's more like a belly shirt with only one sleeve, but it'll get there in time. But anyway, my news for today is I have a new tool to show you. Now, usually I would cut smaller size rings with these pitch cutters. They have a nice little wedge shape to them. But the problem with this is that it produces distorted rings. If the coil is too small, like if the rings are too small, using a pinch cutter actually bends the ring out of shape. And what I want for jewelry, instead of having to order my rings pre-cut from the ring lord like I had been for the last few weeks, I'm just going to start saw cutting them myself. So I'm going to show you a before and after picture right about now. Now in that picture you saw that one ring had a nasty looking divot on the outside. Divot is like a wedge shaped indentation in the ring where the ends of the ring come together. And that's caused by pinch cutters because pinch cutters don't cut absolutely flush. In order to get the perfect looking ring that isn't distorted and the ends match up perfectly like you saw on the other one, you need this. This little baby is known as a jeweler's saw. It's an adjustable jeweler's saw. In fact, I ordered this one from the ring lord. The blade on it is really thin. This one in particular is only 8/1000ths of an inch thick, and it has about 77 teeth per inch. It's perfect for cutting rings that are 20 and 22 gauge wire. Here's a coil of 20 gauge wire wound around a 1/8 inch former, and I'm going to show you how to cut it. Now before I actually do any sawing with this saw, I should probably show you how to install the blade and how to work the saw. This is how it's probably going to come if you order it from the ring lord. It's going to come in an envelope, collapsed down like this. Now all you need to do is unscrew this knob and extend it out to where it's supposed to be, and then tighten it again. That's why it's adjustable, is because it can use different size blades. Now before installing a blade, you want to loosen these knobs up because these are the things that hold the blade in place. You also want to loosen this nut up, this wing nut up, so that you have some leeway here, because what this does is after you get the blade secure on both ends, you want to tighten this to pull the blade tight so that it twangs when you pluck it. You want it to be really tight because that way it'll make the saw blade rigid and it'll cut better, it'll be stronger, and it will last a lot longer if it's tighter, because if it is allowed to bend this way when you're using it, it's not going to last as long. So you take your blade, make sure that the tiny teeth in it are running towards the handle and are facing outside, because it's hard to tell with these saw blades because the teeth are so small. But you have to make sure that they're running the right direction. Now stick one end into a clamp and tighten it just to hold it for now. Okay, and now get this other clamp loose, stick the blade into there, tighten the clamp. Now you want to tighten these as tight as you can, finger tight, so like that and like that. And now that the blade is in there, it's still really weak and flexible, so tighten this screw or nut so that it grabs, and you don't want it to bend a whole lot at all. So tighten it a lot. And that sounds about right. And it doesn't bend a whole lot when you rest it on your finger like that. It's a good way to tell. Okay. Now you're ready to get sawing. Basically, just take the coil that you're working with, and just like wire cutters, you line it up with the end. But first you want to cut one ring with the saw so that you're not lining, so that the first ring that you cut isn't like one end is saw cut and the other end would be pinch cut, because I still use my pinch cutters to clean off the excess from the winding process. But once you get a flush end to work with, just put the saw up against the end. Oh, and first, before you do any sawing, you want to get a little thing of beeswax. This is going to help protect your blade from wear and tear from using it so much, because like I just showed you, when you put the saw blade up against the end of the coil, it's going to be rubbing against the end of the wire quite a bit on one side, which will wear the blade out pretty fast. You don't want to put wax on the blade part because you want that to grip and to cut. But you want to put it on the sides and on the back of the blade so that that way it doesn't get scratched up and damaged by cutting. Because when you cut, you're going to be cutting through like a few rings, and the wire is going to be rubbing against the sides the whole time. So in order to make your blades last longer, you want to put some beeswax, or candle wax works fine. Just put some beeswax on either side, being sure to not get any on the cutting blade, the cutting surface. And then I just sort of rub it in and wipe off the excess. But once it's all waxed up, it should slide a little better. Now you just line the blade up to the end of the wire, and I like to hold it like this so that the saw doesn't move like this when you're cutting. Check it so that the blade is going across the middle of the ring, and start to saw. And hold the end of the coil firmly between your fingers. And you shouldn't have to push at all with this saw. You're just moving the saw back and forth, and if anything, you might even lift up on the saw a little so it's not under its own weight on the rings, because that will bend the blade back and will wear it out faster. And now you see, I cut a ring. Actually, I cut two rings because this one's still loose. So I'm just going to finish off this ring really quick. And now it's off of there too. So now we've got a couple of saw cut rings with perfectly flush ends. And that's the end of the coil right there where I cut them off. There's a little line where I had finished cutting, and that's how I tell which end of the coil I'm working from as I work with this end, because this one's the end with the flush end. Another thing that you want to watch out for when you're sawing is you want to make sure that when you're sawing, you're holding the saw at an angle so that while it's cutting this side of the coil where you want it to, it's not cutting the ring right here where you don't want it to. So you want to saw this way at a shallow angle so that it cuts down that way. And you also want to remove your rings from the saw if they come off or whatever, because if they're shifting around like this, they could fall off into your lap, because they will usually get stuck to this blade and they'll slide down. So you have to shake them off, or you can pull them off with your finger. You have to line up the gap because it's a really small gap. But you want to do that, and you don't want to cut too many rings at once, because once you get down further in the coil, you could wind up cutting this ring right here. And you don't want that to happen, because you want nice shiny rings, and you don't want a ring that's half cut on one side. So, cue the slideshow.